Welcome to Toy Business Unboxed, your gateway to the secrets of the toy industry. Here, Jason Shea, a toy entrepreneur and expert in the field.
Every product we develop is really inspired by some of the real life experience that we have with our son.
60% of all toys last year were sold on Amazon, which is incredible.
Be passionate about it because it's a road, it's a journey.
Like when you have an idea that you think is like gonna somewhat like change the world, make things better, I'd say go for it.
We'll guide you through the enchanting world of toy design, marketing, and manufacturing. Now let the unboxing begin.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Toy Business Unboxed. Today, we are diving deep into the world of board game creation with Martin, the mastermind behind HexaQuest. And also, his journey is anything but unique. He has been a scuba diver instructor, a filmmaker, and a corporate professional before taking the leap into game design. So today, we're going to have a discussion on how he got into the board game space and his journey within the board game industry so far. Thank you so much, Martin, for having to joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very happy to join. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. So first of all, can you start out sharing with your sharing with our listener, like your background with like so many different like things you have tried over in your career? What led you to doing the board game design and led you into the industry?
Yeah, you know, those journeys in life, they tend to take a few twists and turns along the way, and it's certainly been a colorful experience. But I would say my love for board games, it happened really, really early. When I was a kid, I always wanted, when my parents were asking what should my friends or their friends give me as a birthday present or a Christmas present, it would always be, I want board games. Mm-hmm. Sadly, they had really bad taste, so they would just buy Monopoly or something that I really didn't want to play. And I also really didn't have that many people to play with, and my parents weren't really into it. So I loved the board games, but I didn't play so much. But throughout life, I certainly have enjoyed it a lot, and I still do. And I love hosting game nights and going to game nights and also going to the different board game stores to play and so on. But so the journey, it kind of starts me in living in Denmark, which is where I'm originally from. I'm from Copenhagen, Denmark, and I always knew that I wanted to travel, that I wanted something a little bit bigger than Denmark. And after a few shorter stints of living abroad in the US and Andorra and in Austria as well, I finally went to Thailand to become a scuba dive instructor. And in Thailand, I lived there for a year and a half, eventually teaching diving to hundreds of divers, new divers. And I met my ex there as well. And we went traveling around the world, managing dive shops around the world in Philippines and Honduras and Zanzibar. And then ended up in the US, where I started doing YouTube travel documentaries and did a lot of traveling through that, some really out there stuff. So I was doing videos for documenting the tribes of Ethiopia and living with them, with the reindeer herders and the eagle hunters of Mongolia. And so some really, really cool experiences. And that in turn led me to be able to become a commercial filmmaker and doing corporate videos and making a living from that.
I see.
So that's like the boiled down version of my adult life. But yeah, the getting into board game development, it really spurred from sitting in Thailand back then. It's 20 years ago today. Back then, I was sitting with some friends. Then we were playing Trivial Pursuit. And I was like, I love Trivial Pursuit. And then I kind of found out that I didn't like it so much because it has a lot of really frustrating elements to it.
Okay.
I thought that the questions were really inconsistent. I thought that the questions went from being too easy to too hard. You had no control of it. I thought it was really frustrating that you had to roll dice and you didn't have much control of which category the questions were in, and you were just trying to get those little cheeses to win the game, but you're waiting on your turn and you didn't get your cheese. Now you have to wait another round, and there was just a lot of mechanics that I thought were kind of pointless, and I thought the questions were not really of the quality that they should be, and I felt like I had an idea that I could do something much better.
Okay.
And kind of remedy all these different issues.
Okay.
Now, having an idea of a trivia game to actually making a trivia game is not so easy, I found out.
Yes.
And sitting in Thailand, and this is again 2005, so it's pretty early in the internet game and all that. So I was like, well, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna get all these questions from? Because that was kind of the first step. I was like, well, I have an idea of the mechanics, but I'm gonna need thousands of questions to be able to make this trivia game. So how do I get those? I was like, should I buy an encyclopedia maybe and like start creating questions like that? And initially I just started putting down a few questions here and there that I thought were fun, kind of from my travel experiences, and starting building that database of questions slowly but surely over the next few years. And then I thought, well, maybe I could crowdsource it. Maybe I could get a lot of other people to pitch in, because I also thought, well, if I make the questions, it's going to be very centered around my interest and my style, where I thought, well, we need a lot of other people to pitch in so that it becomes really varied and interesting. So I made a contest where you could win an iPod, which was really cool back then. I think it was like a $500 iPod or something crazy like that. And it was a pretty big success. I had maybe 10,000 submissions of questions.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a lot of questions. Okay.
Yeah, so I got a lot of questions. Only problem I found, or the main problem I found, was that most people, when they think of trivia, they all think of the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's really a lot of duplicate questions in there. They all think, oh, this is a fun question, which maybe it is or maybe it isn't. But if you also have 10 other people who think the same, so the quality of those submissions was not that great. And I boiled initially those 10,000 questions down to maybe a couple of thousand. And now through the years, I don't think there's very many of those questions left, because I've just consistently been increasing the quality of that trivia. And that's, I would say, the main reason that it took a really long time to get from concept, or from idea concept, to a product that actually is viable. And that's just on the question side, on the trivia side of it. And then, so that was basically how I came up with the idea.
I see. And I know for the listener that might not be familiar with your particular version, could you also, I know you have like a copy with you, if you can show the copy and kind of explain
absolutely.
the rule.
So HexaQuest here, I call it HexaQuest, the strategic trivia game. HexaQuest is really simple concept. You build a board of hexagons. I can show you some of the hexagons here. So you build a board of hexagons, which, if you can see, look something like this. And so you build a board of those in any random pattern. And what happens is that once the pattern is laid out, you will either see the difficulty of the question, which is also how many points it's worth, or you'll see what category that question is in. And that is the base mechanic of HexaQuest. And the idea is that it will give players choice. So they might have a favorite category. Maybe they love nature. Maybe they love history, movies, food, whatever it is. And they can kind of work their way towards that category and get questions that align with their niche interests.
Okay.
Or they can also say, you know what? I don't like the hard questions. I think strategically for me, it's better to go with some easier questions and then maybe be able to answer more of those. So it gives people a lot of choice. And then in addition, there's a let it ride mechanic, a gambling mechanic, so that when you answer a question correctly, you are actually able to do another up to 2 more questions in that turn to maximize your points. But if you answer any of those incorrectly, then you'll lose all the points from that turn.
Oh, okay. I see.
So besides there's also a couple of special hexagons that will give you double the points. But other than that, it's probably one of the most simple mechanics in board gaming in general. I wanted to keep it super simple, but still be able to have a nice strategic element. And then again, give the players a lot of choice and a lot of opportunity to customize their game. And what I mean about customizing is, like, for example, when you set up the board, the more hexagons you use, the longer the game will be. So you can play with a handful of hexagons if you go to the bar, or you can play with the full gambit of both the base game and the various expansions available and have hours of play time like that. And you can always play with or without any category. So I leave a lot of room for, and I really encourage for people to experiment with, play it however you feel like it. You don't even have to play a board. You could just play hexagon straight out of the bag on a road trip or whatever you want.
Oh, I see. Okay. So that's a lot of flexibility that was designed into the game itself.
Yes, there really is. And again, while keeping it such a simple concept and a game that's easy to both learn and teach within 60 seconds.
Okay.
And it launched in 2021, the base game of HexaQuest, the strategic trivia game, and it was very well received by the media and reviewers and players alike. So that was really, really positive. And I'll say that is, I think, if you are a game developer or a product developer of any kind, that initial proof of concept is your biggest fear, because you might think you have the best idea in the world, but until you actually get some recognition from people saying, I agree with that, I love it too, at that point you're just like, well, maybe people won't like it.
Yeah.
So today I'm in a different spot where that is no longer a concern. I know that if people play HexaQuest, they generally love it, which is a huge compliment and something I'm very proud of course. But it makes me able to switch my focus to other things of marketing and logistics and pricing and all these various things that comes with game development, right?
For sure. Yeah. And I also know you transitioned from like doing it as like a kind of a side project. Now you're doing it full time, correct?
Yeah, I am doing it full time, and it's certainly like that transition was a very, very tough choice for one, and it's also being an entrepreneur, as you know, I'm sure, can be a very stressful situation. Like you quickly learn how simple it is having a job where you get paid every month or every 2 weeks, and you have that consistent paycheck come in. Whereas once you start running your own business and doing that full time, well, that doesn't happen anymore. Now you gotta, it changes the game, pun intended, quite a lot. So at this point, I have been doing it full time for 1.5 years, and I love it, but it is also a very stressful situation because you do have to make sure that things line up the way they should.
Yeah.
But it came basically from a situation where it was getting difficult for me to juggle my full-time job as a filmmaker. I was running a marketing studio, a film studio in a marketing agency in Denver, and juggling that with having to go to game conventions and the different things, it was getting a little bit tricky. And I also thought the more I could focus on HexaQuest, the more I would be able to grow it and so on. So it was a big decision, a big leap of faith, but I'm still here for now.
What would, of course, and what was some of the biggest challenge that you're facing when you're doing this transition?
Well, I think finances is always going to be the biggest transition, almost regardless of your company size, because and I think that is one of the most important things to be wary about and to be on, is to make sure that your finances within your company is okay. Getting your board game on a shelf is, of course, that's a dream of many. For years and years, it was a huge dream of mine. And I was very proud the day that I did manage to get it down in my local board game store here and see it on the shelf and have people buy it, and that's amazing. And it's a big accomplishment when you as a game developer get to that point. But you later realize that that's almost easy compared to having to manage inventory, wholesale, storage, logistics, freight, marketing, production, and all these different things. There's just so much you have to be on top of. And the smaller the company, the harder it is to manage these different flows to make sure that it's not just having a game on a shelf or coming out successfully from a Kickstarter and having a product. It's about making that product sustainable long term. And being able to grow it so that it's not just, and you see it with a lot of smaller Kickstarters where they have one print run and that's the end of it. Because from that one print run, you need to make sure that you actually fund the next print run and that you fund the various expenses. And there's a lot of expenses. There are a lot of expenses in this industry. So managing all that's the hardest part of running a company like this, for sure. The game development, although of course it took me a long time the first time round, but the game development is really fun. It's extremely fun. And if you have some finances to back it up so that you can do some nice prototypes and you can test out various materials, and it's incredibly fun. But game development of owning a board game development company is such a small part of what you're actually doing. Mostly you're running a company that could be almost selling anything. It doesn't really matter. Where the game development, it's a bit of a luxury when I get to sit down and play test some new ideas and do these different things. And of course that has to, the R&D part of it needs to exist always so that there's an evolution within your company. But it's definitely not what you're doing every day. Mostly I'm sitting looking at spreadsheets, something less exciting. So.
I think that's a lot of time that people didn't realize when they are getting into the industry. That's just like you mentioned, there's a lot more other element of running a business that you also need to consider, because now you're not a designer, you're really a business owner. If you want to go with self-publishing route, of course you can always try to license your idea to other people or other companies, but that's also have a lot of pros and cons that you want to also consider. And I think with the board game market being so competitive nowadays, what are some of the marketing strategy that have worked for you, and what are the things that you could also share with our listeners?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to, of course. And I think before I go into that, I'll just say that there is exactly that common trope of saying that, well, if you're a board game developer, you shouldn't self-publish because you'll just become a business owner. But I think it's a little bit untrue in the sense well, that's almost any product development. Sure, you can go and license your game and you'll get a very small percentage. And you can go that route if you just want to be a game designer. But if you feel like, well, I would like to take on that challenge of running the whole thing, well, then the potential reward is also so much greater.
True.
So I think when you look online and when you are in the various game design forums and stuff, the typical response to people saying, oh, should I self-publish, is that people will instantly say, no, you should never self-publish. It's a terrible idea. And I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it's just important to understand what comes with that decision of self-publishing.
That's very important.
So that's just something I want to put a bit in. But yeah, in terms of marketing, so marketing, there's nothing harder in this world. I don't think there's a person in this world that just is fantastic at marketing, because it is such a trial and error process. So of course you can be very, very competent at understanding the different algorithms and the different marketing efforts that work in the moment and of the time and all these different things. But it is a lot of trial and error. And then through that, you dial your way into something that works better and better. What has worked best for me, and I would say it's very important in my journey to kind of understand where I'm coming from, in that I certainly am not really the best at anything. And I knew nothing about game development or marketing or logistics and freight and all these various things, branding. I knew a little bit about branding, but in general, I had to learn everything from scratch. And I didn't really know where to go to get that information, which is also why that journey took me a very long time. From idea to conception with HexaQuest was a journey of 16 years. And of course, it's not like you work on a game consistently every day for 16 years. So I would work heavy on it for a few months, then maybe I'd get frustrated about running into some material complications or not finances or whatever it was, and then shelf it for maybe a year and then come back to it. But I always knew that eventually I was gonna make it happen, and that I would take that idea through completion, right? But sorry, I got off track again. But yeah, anyway, what has worked the best for me after HexaQuest launched is definitely social media influencers. So working directly with various influencers, whether they be lifestyle coaches or board game reviewers or whatever they are, whatever where you think that you can reach your audience within your niche genre. And I think this is certainly consistent throughout any product development or any product release, is that these influencers can be massively valuable. But to kind of tie that into the difficulties of trial and error with marketing, you might go out with a massive influencer with millions of viewers, put out a beautiful TikTok video, and it does amazing. And you'll sell 1,000 games in a day, and it's a beautiful thing. But you might do the exact same thing with an even better video at a larger influencer and get nothing out of it, because that is just viral marketing. You cannot guarantee a viral hit.
Yeah, that's correct.
The more videos you do and the more lines you throw out there, the bigger your chance of having a viral hit is. And I've had some good viral hits. I have certainly, like HexaQuest has at this point been shown to tens of millions of people throughout the various social media. So I've certainly been able to create some exposure around it. But again, as a small company, it can be tricky to go and say, well, I can go with this large influencer. It's going to cost me $1,000 to put out a 15-second, 30-second video. Does that $1,000 generate revenue for me that it makes sense? Because $1,000 in a small company can be a lot of money. But if you don't do it, that won't work either. So you really got to manage those efforts and then track them properly. And as a tip to people doing this is really look at the influencers. Don't just look at how many followers do they have, because you can't necessarily trust that number. They might have been artificially inflated.
Inflated. Yep.
Look at their videos. Are they getting any interaction? Are they getting clicks and likes, and are people sharing them? I was like, is it an influencer that actually has a good core audience that you can reach, or is it just somebody who wants your $1,000 because they are able to look like they have a proper following? Because you do see that a lot, and you don't want to be wasting your money in that sense. And I've certainly learned something through that, and I've had bad experiences, and I have some people, some influencers I work with who are amazing, who does an incredible job, and who really cares to be a partner with you to promote your project, because they understand if they can make you successful, they will be successful, and I will use them again, and I'll be happy to pay that $1,000, because I know if I throw $1,000 at them, most likely I'm gonna make that back tenfold. So yeah, trial and error is marketing 101 for sure. And as I know, like, you work a lot with Amazon, and you also know with Amazon it's the same thing. You can very easily spend a lot of money not seeing a lot of results. And the earlier in your transition period of starting marketing efforts, the more expensive it's going to be. So you start off having to throw out 100 hooks in that ocean and find out which of them are valuable, which of them are not. But as you find out doing that trial and error process, each hook is going to cost you money. And it can get expensive quick. So managing your marketing spend, finding out what works and what doesn't, is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Just like you mentioned, there's a lot of different things you need to consider. Even just follow up on the Amazon side, there's a lot of different elements. There's the search engine optimization, there's advertising, inventory management, catalog management, and also all the creative. There's like 5 major area you need to consider in order to do well.
Oh yeah, for sure. It gets really deep.
Yeah.
Another thing that has worked amazingly for me, and it's not something that will work for everybody, but I think that there is a version of it that can work for most. And there might also be some of your toys and stuff where there can be an equivalent that's interesting. So initially, when I had my first print run produced, I managed to get HexaQuest into a lot of Airbnbs, for example.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So that works really good for me. I am also in hundreds of bars and breweries and cideries, mostly in Colorado, but I'm starting to spread around the country, because HexaQuest is such a good game for a bar. Like bars and trivia, it kind of goes hand in hand, and it's really easy setup. If you lose a hexagon or a card, it doesn't really matter. It still plays perfectly fine. And I've seen a lot of organic traffic and an organic growth from those efforts. And when I put out a game at a bar, and again, it doesn't work for all games, because sometimes the setup will be too in depth, and but it depends on the bar. Some bars you can sit and play a 4-hour board game. Other bars that would never work. But when I put a game in there, it cost me the manufacturing cost of my game, my time to go and present it to the bar and the owner and introduce myself, show the game off, which is what I do basically. But then it can sit there for years. And it can reach potentially hundreds and hundreds of people. And I do consistently see direct results from those kind of guerrilla marketing efforts that
that's a very interesting,
like, thinking outside of the box has always been a big thing for me, and something that I feel like always is something I can rely on, that it will work, to not do it the way that other people necessarily always do it. Of course, you have to have a product that you trust. Because HexaQuest, I think, is it's a very pretty product, whatever. But just because it's pretty doesn't mean that it's a good game. So if I had HexaQuest, people like what it looks like, but it doesn't play well. If the questions weren't the quality they are, if the components were the nice quality, well, then they wouldn't generate sales. But I trust my product. I have really polished it to where if people play it, I trust that they will like it. So it's worth it for me to. It's like that is actually my best seller. If people play, they buy. So the more people I can get to actually sit down and try it out, well, the better my business will do, and the more growth HexaQuest will see. So if you have to trust your product to be able to do something like this, where it doesn't do the opposite, where it's like, oh, now I tried it, I certainly don't want it. Like, then that doesn't really work. And there's there's a lot of products that are not so reliant on quality in general, where it's more of just like a one-time simple use or a fun gimmick or whatever it is, but where it's like, yeah, that was fun, but I don't actually want to buy it. So it really depends on your product. But I will say that trying to think outside of the box is really valuable. And if you're a game developer, you're already thinking, or a toy developer, you're already thinking outside of the box. You are of that creative mindset. So applying that creative mindset to your marketing efforts as well, I think is really, really valuable.
For sure. And looking back, what are some of the lessons that you wish you have learned early in your, game development journey?
Well, I will say that there's a lot of them, and a lot of them, the more you can do to network as a developer, the more people you can talk to that have already gone through the ringer, the shorter and more efficient your own journey will be. So I was doing this, as I mentioned, very much solo, learning everything by myself, doing that research by myself. And I wish I had somebody to reach out to and saying, hey, what is acrylate styrolene? How does wood work when you do it in mass production? What are the different printing methods? Box sizes, UV printing, all these different things. Instead of learning by yourself, if you can start networking, do it, because otherwise it's a really tough journey. And there's probably a lot that you can learn as well from stuff you won't think about yourself. And I will say on that note that if anybody listens to this like, oh, I think he could actually have some information that could be useful to be about my product development, you're always welcome to reach out to me. And I do mean that. Like, I love helping others shorten that journey, because it was like climbing a really big mountain with no Sherpas, and it can be really, really tough. I will say some of the things that have been very valuable to me that I would like to pass on to other potential developers is, for one, make sure your branding is on point. You don't want to start off with a product in a weaker version and then have to rebrand, change your logo, change your style, change your coloring, fonts, everything. Get that brand recognition dialed in really, really early. If you are hoping to make something big, you can't do it half-assed to begin with. You have to really think of that branding early on, and like pay a proper logo designer, if you're not a designer yourself, to make something that is really, really special and that will stand the test of time. I will also say, once you go into manufacturing, well, make sure that you get product samples and that you really make the right decision on who that manufacturer, the right manufacturer for you. Who is that? And for HexaQuest, and Tumbling Heads, which is the parent company of HexaQuest, which is when we create more games in the future, quality of components is something I really, really value. So for me, having both quality control, but also just quality of components in general, means that I need a high-end manufacturer to get to that point. And I work directly with Panda Game Manufacturing, who are absolutely amazing, but they're not the cheapest, and they will never aim to be the cheapest. They're certainly competitive, but they are, in my opinion, one of, if not the best manufacturer within that industry. So for me, that's something I value really, really highly.
I see.
There can absolutely be others who will need a cheaper version where quality is not so important, where it's more of getting the right price, getting the faster turnaround, whatever it is. But just make sure that you choose the right manufacturer for that, and find a manufacturer that is interested of being your partner. Somebody who really cares about your product, somebody that will come in and saying, I see that you asked for this exact component, you asked for this quote, but how do you feel about this? If they are the right manufacturer, they should come to you and saying, we have an idea, what do you think? And again, that's something that you will pay for to an extent, having a good project manager, having somebody who cares. But in the long run, I think it's absolutely 100% worth it. Another good tip, or like crucial tip, I will say, and we kind of discussed it a little bit already, but is understanding pricing, understanding your margins, knowing what will your manufacturing cost be, what will your wholesale price be, what will your direct to distributors cost be, what should your retail price be compared to the competition. Understanding all those, so that once you start selling your product, your margins are good. Those margins need to cover storage, they need to cover your marketing spend, they need to cover your next print run. That being on top of your finances in that sense will determine whether you make it or break it.
Yeah, for sure. You need to definitely understand the margin. That's something when I'm discussing with people in the industry, you need to understand your margin for any different platform you're selling on. Especially for Amazon, you want to make sure you have at least 25% or higher in profit margin for it to grow, because you also need to run ads. There's also a lot of other expenses you need to consider as well. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all the tips. So what is next for HexaQuest? What are some of the new projects you have on the horizon that you're working on?
So in the immediate future, I can show you what's next here, which is this beauty. So
yeah,
HexaQuest Party. So already as it is, within the HexaQuest universe, there's a bunch of different expansion packs that add additional questions, additional hexagons that you can add into the mix, so that you can kind of build your own adventure and have a lot of fun with setting up, so that you can dive into comic books. You can there's conservation categories, there's Hollywood gossip, who's who in Hollywood, there's true crime, even there's all kinds of different expansion packs available, and they all play with or without any other HexaQuest product.
Got it.
But HexaQuest Party, our new version coming out here, not only does it add additional trivia categories, for example, there's a paleontology category, which is both about the scientific parts of paleontology, but it also dives into the various media-related information from paleontology. So we're talking Jurassic Park and the Flintstones and so on. There's a anthropology category with questions from cultures all around the world throughout history, but also with questions from every single state in the US. Which I think is really, really fun, because every state has some really fun, quirky facts to them. Now there's also a pets category, and two other categories as well. We even include sports now. Sports is something we have been requested a lot, and within any kind of trivia game, you'll often see sports. But I think, not being really a big sports guy myself, I think sports is a really, really tricky one, because either you know sports or you don't. and generally the sports you'll know, you might know every golfer out there, you might know who won the World Cup of soccer in 1992 or whatever it is. but it's always very specific information to whatever your niche interest is within the sports world. So
Sports,
it's like, so I figured, well, I want to make a sports category that's accessible to everyone.
I see. Okay.
So what I did was I removed all players, all teams, and all
Mhm.
statistics. So
Okay.
instead, it's all about the mechanics and the history of sports, so
Oh,
that
okay.
it's
Okay.
anybody can be entertained by it and have fun with it, and
Yeah.
not
Okay.
feel like it's like, what do I know about football players? Like, I don't know any soccer players because I never watched soccer. So,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people will feel that sports is not so accessible in that sense. Of course, it
Yeah.
could be fun later on to dig into some specifics and have maybe a soccer category where it does go deep into those statistical elements that
Mhm.
sports fans love. But for now, we wanted to make it more general in that sense.
Got it.
But so why is it called Party? And what we did now is it's not just trivia. Now
Mhm.
we also have a charades category.
Oh, okay.
We have a drawing category, and we have a singing category. So you'll
Oh,
go
okay.
straight from answering trivia questions
Okay.
to suddenly have to do charades, singing, all drawing. And we also have party cards that suddenly, instead of being an individual turn-based experience, suddenly opens it up where the entire group has to interact with each other.
Oh,
So
okay.
party
Okay.
is something I've
Got it.
been working on the last couple of years. It
Yeah.
had a complete a final successful Kickstarter here in December, and
Mhm.
it's out within the next month or two. I'm waiting on the final dates here, but it's
Oh,
getting
nice.
really, really close, and I think
Mhm.
it's gonna be a really big hit and something very fun. And of course, as always, within HexaQuest, you can always play with or without any of these categories. Maybe
Mm.
not every night is a charades night or a karaoke night, but
Mhm.
once it is, well, then you can include those, or you can even play with them standalone. You can actually
Mm.
play with just the party categories if you don't feel like tonight is appropriate for trivia.
I see. Okay. Okay.
We also have another expansion I just want to mention, since that might be kind of relevant to your listeners, is we also have a category called Prodigy, which
Mhm.
brings the age rating, which is normally set for, at party, it's set for 10, and for the base game, it's set for 14 plus.
Oh, okay.
But with Prodigy, it brings it to ages 7 plus, and it's
Oh, okay.
actually a
More friendly. Yeah.
category
For the
that's
family. Okay.
written by an elementary school teacher. So the quality
Oh,
is
okay.
really, really high. It's
Nice.
informative. It's somewhat educational, but it's also just really dialed into that kids' universe of all the fun things there.
I see.
So we keep developing those various things. So yeah, that we have a lot in the works. We also have some new games that we haven't really been releasing to the public yet, but
Okay.
we got stuff in the works for sure.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing. So, for our listener and viewer, where can people find you online?
So of course we are available on Amazon if you want to check out and purchase the game for yourself. We also on social media at HexaQuest. Definitely check out our Instagram, and on hexaquest.com if you want to support a small business. That is definitely the direct from me is the best way to do it. So yeah, going to hexaquest.com and checking out the various offerings we have. And we also do specials now and then, of course, as you would expect. So yeah, follow us and see where we're going.
Mhm. Got it. Yeah. Thank you so much again for sharing your experiences and some of the knowledge and tips with our listener. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to our podcast today. And we hope you have enjoyed the conversation and find it insightful and inspiring. If you like what you have heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your support and would love it if you can leave us a review and share the podcast with your friend and colleague. For more resource tips and the latest update in the toys and game industry, visit our website at toy-launch.com. Join the conversation and connect with us on social media using hashtag Toy Business Unboxed. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestion for the future episode. Until next time, keep innovating, keep creating, keep bringing joy to toys. This is Jason Shea signing off on the Toy Business Unboxed podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bravo. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thank you.